Anyway, again, glad to be here. I'm going to tell you something. I'm a little spoiled this morning. I mean, I had, Rebecca was up there going, what can I do to take care of this? And, what can I do to help out? And Kayvon has been absolutely wonderful with getting the video up here and even having a backup microphone. All right, that's a corporate trainer. I'll tell you that right now. Having been one, that's a corporate trainer. But, it's just nice to be able to have that and to be able to have things taken care of in a way that I really do appreciate. So thank you all this morning and all. Long time ago in a land far away, at the First Baptist Church of Magnolia, Mississippi, when I was, like I said, a long time ago, 6 and 7 in the primary Sunday school class, we had Miss Sarah Ann, or as we knew her, Miss Sarah Ann. But she was our teacher and beloved, absolutely beloved. She had this ability to tell a story, and she did it in an orthodox style. What she would do, she had a group of pictures about that thick, and these were big pictures too, big cardboard pictures. And she would hold that picture and tell that story. And she could do it in such a way. I thought about her often this week as I was getting ready for this. And this was one of her favorite stories. And she'd look at us and say, boys and girls, this is one of my favorite stories. It is the story of the Good Samaritan. And then she would tell it. And gets me right there still. Really does. I remember those days quite fondly. Let's say it that way. As I look at this story, I am reminded that, Jesus was surrounded by people who weren't particularly fond of him and were questioning what he was doing, so they got into a little bit of a back and forth. Now, that was not unusual. Today, we would consider it an argument. But doing the back and forth back at that time, and even in our Jewish communities today, that's considered normal. That is engaging. And so they were engaging in conversation, and the idea of what is the greatest commandment came up. And the teacher said, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, and your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Now, my friends, I take that and I create my own definition of spirituality. And let me say this right now. Spirituality gets a bum rap. People think, okay, when I say the word spiritual at the VA, what do I hear? It's religion. It's organized religion. I want no part of it. Let me ask you, when I say the word spirituality, does religion come up? Religion can be a part of your spirituality, okay? But spirituality doesn't go the other way around. Spirituality is much bigger. And from what the teacher was saying to Jesus, this is where I get my definition of spirituality, because it is about connection. You hear a lot of folks will say that we were made for connection. So for me, spirituality is a connection with yourself, others, and transcendence, or something greater than you. Whether it be God, whether it be Jesus, whether it be another prophet or spiritual teacher, whether it be the universe, whether it be wind or the Great Spirit, whatever it is, when you have a connection, you have that spirituality that I think is being brought up in this piece of Scripture. Because when we look at it, how do we connect to ourselves? The people I work with experience significant trauma. Trauma can take away a lot of who you are. No matter who experiences it, no matter what kind of trauma it is, it can pull away from you things that you used to hold dear. And so connection with the folks that I work with themselves is difficult. It's difficult. But what I do or try to do is look at values. And so the question I will ask, and I'll ask you too, what is important to you? And I want you to think about it for a second. What is important to you? Well, one of the things you all are saying today is that community, spirituality, being close to God is important to you because guess what? You're here in a worship service. Now, for most of the folks that I deal with, and I'm sure this is probably one of your big answers too, relationships. Relationships are important. Most of them are broken. So I encourage folks to work here so that you can have out here. And so again, I encourage you, look at the values. Look at the values that you have. Now look at the values the people outside see of us. Have a nice big sign up front. Immigrants, welcome. That's one of our values. And I will mess up the name, but that's it, whatever. Blessing box. Okay. That is another thing that says that's another value that we have. That is a way we let folks know outside of these walls that this is what the Congregational Church of the Peninsula values. We say it publicly. We are an open and affirming congregation. We say that publicly. I mean, think about the stuff that we say outside of these walls. And what we're saying in my mind is, if you want to connect with us, this is the values that we hold. If you hold these values, you will probably find a very welcoming place here. And it's okay if some people don't. There's lots of churches up and down this road here. But I encourage you to think about it. What groups are you a part of? Or where do you feel welcome? And what is it about those groups that makes you feel welcome? What is it about those coming together? What is it? It's a connection. To me, that's what spirituality is. When we're able to say, this is what I value. And these are the groups that I go to express those values, but also to feel connected to others who have the same values that I do. You'll notice something. I haven't said religion. I haven't said you have to come to church on Sunday. I haven't said you had to read the Bible. I haven't said, this, that, and the other thing. Because spirituality is much bigger. Now, your spirituality may say, you know what? I am going to read the Bible. I am going to come and gather with church. But it doesn't always have to be that way. And that's one of the things that I try to teach our veterans at our VA is because most of them have been hurt by some kind of organized religion or their own moral injury for the stuff that they have done has taken away this idea of any kind of religion coming together. So, my friends, I encourage you to think about it. What are the groups that you go to? Where are the places that you go to? Most of you know I go to 12-step programs and have been doing so for 34 years. One of the reasons why I go is I like the fellowship. I like the idea of being able to come together. Years ago, I was up in Montreal, and I called and I said, I'm the 12-step office, and I said, I'm looking for an English-speaking meeting. If any of you have been to Montreal, you know that they speak French first. Did I mention French first? I'll say it again, French first. And English only if they have to. And so I asked for an English-speaking meeting. The person had a very heavy French accent and I think misunderstood me. So I found this meeting. I walked in. I was a couple seconds late and they started the meeting and they spoke French. And I went, okay, I can still feel that connection. I know why we're here. I can feel that. And then all of a sudden, I'm sitting there and I'm kind of in my own little space feeling this. And the person who was leading the meeting pointed at me. And I'm like, okay, he wants me to share. Oh, what am I going to say? I don't know French. And I just threw my hands up and said, "Hi, I'm Thomas. I don't know French, and I'm just happy being here and feeling the spirit that you have in this place." And the gentleman looked up and said, "Why don't we do the rest of the meeting in English so that our friend can feel a part of us?" And I didn't learn until a day or two later that what he had done was broken every rule that they ever had up in the Montreal 12-step program, because he spoke in English. But again, it was that welcome. It was that connection that we had. And when I look at this story, even though the people around Jesus were not his biggest fans, they were connecting. They were doing a back and forth. Jesus was able to say to them, "Go and do the same. Go and live out those values that you just talked about." And so, my friends, I encourage you today to look at your values, where you go to live those values out. And I encourage you to remember those values may look a little different, but they're always going to be the same. They're always going to be the same. So, I think I should explain my moment up here. First of all, let me say this. Thank you for allowing me to do something different. If you can't appreciate it, I understand. All right, but this is how I connect to transcendence. And what I have told folks, the veterans that I work with, I'm saying, they go, "Well, how do you connect with something much, much bigger?" And I'm like, if you can't describe it, you've connected. Think about it. When wind blows, do you connect with that wind? Have you ever tried to explain that? It's hard. Again, connection with transcendence. All right. In January, Dr. King's birthday, we have the holiday, and so I always do a service. I've been doing it for the last 13 years. And I do a lot of research, and I just love it. My dogs can't stand it because there's lots of gospel music going on, and lots of preaching and all, and lots of amens and me dancing around the house, and they're like, "What in the world is wrong with him?" So I was doing some research on Dr. King, and I found this clip. And what it was is this was the movement of, this freedom movement, Chicago Moment of Freedom. It was a time in 65, 67 that they were having a lot of civil rights unrest there. And you know something Dr. King said? He said he found more hostility in Chicago than he did in Mississippi. It kind of blew me away. So they're in this church here. He is going to preach. Now, all of a sudden, he is up there getting ready. I think he was waiting on a lapel mic. Now, I don't know why all the mics up in front weren't working, but he was waiting for a lapel mic. And so he's there, and he's looking at his notes, and he's just standing up there, basically by himself. And behind him are these outstanding ministers, all men, in their collars and their suits, and they're all looking sophisticated, just sitting there nervous and kind of anxious. And when is he going to speak? We came here to hear him, and he's just standing up there. And then over here on this other side, we had civil rights folks, people who were the leaders and all, outstanding men who were just as nervous, just as anxious. The congregation is getting anxious. Now, they've been having all of this singing, all this joyousness, all of the Spirit is flowing here. And here's Dr. King just waiting. And all of these men behind him just kind of waiting too. Now, who's the Samaritan? Mahalia Jackson. She just gets up and starts singing so that the restlessness of the crowd will not lose the spirit that the music has brought into the place. And so she gets up, starts singing. They crank up that old Hammond organ, and all, and just go after it. You saw the results there. And for me, that's that Samaritan moment, because she rescued Dr. King from having to deal with a restless congregation, but to deal with a congregation that was full of spirit. Something that she could do. And you know, I play that often at the house. Because it is that moment, that reminder that just like that gentleman on the side of the road where the priest had walked around, the Levite walked around because they wanted nothing to do with it. You see, their values of caring were overridden by their value of power. So, you know, if we don't, where I'm from, we say if we don't talk about it, it didn't happen. So they just walked the other way. It's pretty clear that the Samaritan had a value of care. So he was able to take care of this gentleman and take him off to this inn where he could stay and heal from his wounds. And he gave the innkeeper 2 days of salary to go ahead and take care of him. My friends, that's what caring is. That's the value of caring. But Jesus' point was, I want you to see something much bigger. You can ask who the neighbor is. What do you think? What are you thinking? What do you see? What are you feeling? And that's where that came from. That idea that to rescue that moment, Mahalia Jackson stood up and sang. Now let me say something here. Not only was she the only woman up there, but she was looked down by the civil rights and the religious community at that time. She was famous. She knew what she was doing when she sang. I mean, there was a command in her voice that just blows me away. But yet, she was a woman. You know, this month we're celebrating the women in our midst. She was the only one up there. And most of the time, she was the only one up there, only woman up there. But, you know, as Dr. King reminded them, said, she can stir the spirit much more than I can with one song. She can bring a group together. She will bring people and fill a stadium. I can fill a church. He understood her value. And he was able to appreciate it. And if that didn't work, he would also remind them, oh, by the way, when the civil rights movement started, it was Mahalia Jackson's checkbook that kept it going. And that usually calmed them down a little bit. But you know, my friends, this leads up to this idea of transcendence. And I want to thank you for seeing mine today. I have this bad habit. I get on YouTube and I watch a video. My favorite is, some of you may remember Susan Boyle when she came to Britain Has Talent. She came out, she was kind of frumpy, it was pretty clear she didn't know how to connect well. And so people were looking down upon her and didn't think that she would be able to do anything. And what does she do? She sings a very hard song. And so, you know, people are looking down going, okay, let's go ahead and get this done with. And she starts to sing with this voice. And the faces, like Dr. King's up here, change. My friends, that's a connection for me for transcendence. I don't know how to explain that. But when she started to sing, the people changed their attitudes. They started to see things very differently. That's what connection to transcendence can do. Think about it for a second. When we went through COVID, we weren't doing much when we were working through COVID, okay? We were trying to find a pastor, but yet we were going through a process to understand our values. And then on top of that, we merged. All during a pandemic. My friends, that's touching transcendence. That is this place saying, we are not going to sit back. We are going to move forward with what we believe is important. And that moved me in so many ways to watch this church do this. And to be a part of the Sunday morning services from a video that I created in the chapel at the VA. But I want to encourage you today to look for that connection, that transcendence, that going forth and live that Jesus was talking about. Because when you do, I think you'll be amazed at what happens. Like I said, I go back to those YouTube videos, and what's bad about that is you watch the video and there's ones on the side that have the same kind of story. Oh, click. Oh, wow. Click again. Oh, wow. Click one more time. Oh, and I'm feeling this spirit. I can't describe it. I feel good. And over, and I'll confess this right now, the first time I did it, I was on there for 2 hours. I had no idea that I was flying through the way I was doing. But it was that moment where I connected. In this case, for me, it was God. It was universe, God, and Thomas, all right here together. Click. I want it again. Click. I want it again. And so, my friends, that's what did it for me. I use videos now for my worship services. And they transform the hymn. We can get a big pipe organ on one hymn, and then we can get a guitar on the next. And it's because of that transcendence that I feel. Again, it's hard to describe. But I encourage you to feel it, to allow yourself to feel it and say, okay, whatever this is, I'm going to connect with it. Because, my friends, that's what a spiritual moment means. Is to be able to have some kind of connection, not only with yourself, not only with others, but something much, much bigger. So I encourage you, I'm going to challenge you to find that. What is important to you? How do you show it? Where do you go to be a part of it? What are those relationships meaning to you? And can you feel something that is so hard to describe, you say, I just don't know how to describe it? I encourage that. I go back to that time in that primary Sunday school class with Miss Sarah Ann and her great big smile and her big picture saying, this is that story. May it always be so. Amen.